starting out to welcome everyone, to let you know that our sponsoring organizations are the League of Women Voters of the United States and the Global NGO Executive Committee. And I'm Dr. Connie Sylvan-Sensor, and I will be your moderator today. So both sponsoring organizations, the League of Women Voters and the Global NGO Executive Committee, have many valuable opportunities for deeper engagement with the UN system and raising awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals. You can learn more about these organizations from the websites lwv.org or gnec.ngo. The League of Women Voters of the United States has 100,000 members and over 500,000 supporters. Our mission is to defend democracy and empower voters through advocacy, education, and litigation at the local, state, and national level. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure that everyone is represented in our democracy. We encourage our members to think globally and act locally. The Global NGO Executive Committee supports more than 1,500 UN-vetted NGOs associated with the United Nations Department of Global Communications, the civil society unit, and we act as a liaison between the two. GNEC, as it's affectionately known, provides strategic guidance to help NGOs become more effective partners at the UN and to amplify their voice at the decision-making table. GNEC collaborates with the Department of Global Communications to plan and organize briefings and the UN Civil Society conferences. So today, we will have an overview of our speakers with some targeted questions. We will have an overview from our speakers with some targeted questions for interactive discussion. So according to UN Women, balanced political participation and power sharing between women and men in decision-making is the internationally agreed target set in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995. A 2020 study by King College London found that female leaders in government or parliaments make for more caring societies and less corruption and are less likely to go to war. Women and girls are peacemakers and peace builders. The CEDAW handbook states that governments with gender parity are better at promoting sustainable development, climate action, and peace. And 2022 is the first year that every parliament in the world had a female member. Yes. So a powerful route to achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls is engaging them in governmental institutions to initiate and support policy decisions that affect their environmental, economic, social, and cultural lives and livelihood. Strong democratic institutions are built on gender equity, inclusive of equal representation and participation by women and girls. Our panel will discuss strengthening institutions by promoting gender equity in parliamentary bodies at a global level, encouraging women to run for elected office at a national level, and passing the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, at the state and local level. It is my pleasure now to introduce our panel of experts. Nuhad Yazbik Dumit is a tenured professor and associate dean at the School of Nursing, American University of Beirut, Lebanon. Welcome, Nuhad. Rebeca Moreno is the operations coordinator for the political platform Aúna, Mexico, and co-founder of the Feminist Circle collective. Welcome, Rebeca. Alex Matere is the executive director of Youth Bridge, Kenya. Welcome, Alex. Erin Loos Cutraro is the founder and CEO of She Should Run. Welcome, Erin. And Ashley Raveche is the president at UNA San Francisco and past president of the League of Women Voters, California, San Francisco League. And now I'd like to begin by asking our first question of our panelists. And the first question goes out to Nuhad. Nuhad, could you discuss your story about running for parliament and thoughts about elections in Lebanon? How did women succeed in being elected to parliament, and can their success be replicated by other women who are running?
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Connie, and thank you for the Women's League for hosting me again. It's an honor and a privilege. I will start immediately with my story. So I ran twice for parliament, the first time in 2018, after I served as the president of the Order of Nurses in Lebanon and witnessed inequality and unfairness in health resource allocation nationally at a national level. And I saw the need for reform for better healthcare services and outcomes. But also as a researcher, because I was a faculty member, investigating the nursing workforce challenges, I became more aware of the needs of the people, not only nurses who have a lot of challenges, especially people in underserved areas and nurses in underserved areas that were growing year by year. I mean, the number of underserved areas were growing more than because of the socioeconomic gap, which is very big related to our economic situation and collapse. So given those circumstances, among others, I decided that I was asked to run, and I decided that, yes, why not? It was my first experience with no money, no political affiliation, no support. I depended mainly on social media and street campaigning with youth groups. And this is the capital that every country needs to invest in, the youth. They are amazing. When you engage them, they make miracles. And those groups immediately supported me together with faculty members from universities and civil society actors. And the lesson I learned in 2018 was street campaigning has a strong impact because it brings you closer to people. People will know you and decide if they want to elect you or not. I ran again in 2022. By that time, we accumulated enough research-based evidence for the root causes of the problems affecting the healthcare system and the lives of the people in the country, as well as the education, because these were the two areas I was interested and well informed of. So we learned more about ways to address these issues through legislation and policy, among other things. I believed, and I still believe, that we need to do something and act on reform. Basically, we used to call for reform from outside. I thought maybe we need to call for reform and work on reform from the inside the parliament where they make the decisions. So I said, okay, I will run, but I was not convinced until the youth groups again from different universities approached me and urged me to do that with support from colleagues from different universities, but also colleagues from a platform that we created after the Beirut port blast called Khadit Beirut. And now it is called Scholar Activists for Impact and Learning, where we used our scholarship in serving communities using a bottom-up approach. So with that, I ran again because I was known as an activist. We had several projects with the communities, and I had better connections learning from that situation. But again, in 2022, the money was almost gone because our banks took our money. We had no money, even worse situation. But I had more youth volunteers, more volunteers using their time and effort and the little money they have in helping me run the campaign. I didn't make it, but what I made is that I scored 5 times more. I was the ninth woman among the 118 who made it to who ran for parliament. Only 8 of the top 10 made it to the parliament. So I thought this is a good lesson that we can learn from. Now, my thoughts about the elections in my country, we don't have a quota for women in the parliament. And this is a struggle that has been there for many, many years, for decades, actually. And we're pushing for that. So despite the little gains we made in 2022 as the Change Movement group, 13 MPs were from the Change Movement, elections in Lebanon are still controlled by the traditional corrupt political parties that manipulated the political system for many decades. They are responsible for all the disasters that we are experiencing. And they control the electoral spending. They spend a lot of money. And most of the thing that they spend on is media. They pay to media. So I've never interviewed because I cannot afford paying the media for an interview on TV or radio or anything else. So these are a few challenges that we face as independent, honest people who want really to serve the public welfare rather than serving ourselves. Allow me to take a minute to share with you the story of a woman who made it to parliament. Proudly, my colleague, Professor Najat Saliba. She's a professor of chemistry, a scholar activist even before thinking of running to parliament. She initiated a national project called the Environment Academy. She was so close to people because she broke the academic silos and moved and worked with people for the people. Najat could make it because of her closeness to the grassroots. And that is one of the reasons for her success story. She is called the daughter of Earth because everybody knows her that she is so close to not only to the people, but also to the gardens, to the public spaces, to the land, etc. Of course, she used social media, but also like us, she used door-to-door visits in each and every town where she ran for parliament. So this is in a nutshell my experience with running 2 times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuhad. And now I'm going to ask a question of Rebecca. Rebecca, can you discuss what Aúna does to identify and support women to run for political office? How are decisions made about who runs for office? And what are the biggest challenges? What is the most successful digital and/or security strategy that Aúna or the Feminist Circle has developed for women candidates? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Connie. I'm gonna present. I have a presentation, so please allow me to share. Well, I don't see here how to share the presentation, so I'm just gonna go and explain. First of all, because we have participants from all over the world, I thought it is useful to share with you a little bit of the context in Mexico, because we have a very particular context here. Well, first of all, I want to share with you that Mexico was one of the latest countries in give women's rights to vote. We have that right until 1953. And after that, during the 90s and 2000, we have a lot of feminist activists that push for having quotas in the legislative power. And actually, these quotas give us a lot of success, because in 2014, we acquired gender parity as a constitutional principle and a rule. And after that, everything has changed in Mexico and in the decision-making positions. Right now, we have 50-50 in all decision-making positions, in all government positions. That means that in 2024, that we have election and electoral process, we will elect more than 20 representatives, and 10,000 of them will be women. And that for us is a huge opportunity to change our country. But also, what Aúna has recognized or identified is that we have a problem because women in decision-making roles often have limited opportunity to exercise power. And why is that? Well, as you know, or maybe not, but we have identified 3 main causes. The first one is what all of us know, historical inequalities. You know, women have less access to financial and human resources than men. We have less opportunities of education and less opportunities to develop our political careers. But also we have found that parties are a big gatekeepers of substantive representation and substantive participation. Here in Mexico, we have 4 big national parties, but we have a lot of parties in the local context. So parties are predominantly male dominated, and they control the nominations and sometimes manipulate internal rules to decide where to allocate the budget, where to allocate training. They lack security mechanisms for women, especially, and overall, meaning men in power, they choose women who are either family members or unquestioning loyalties of their decisions. And the third cause that we identify is political violence against women based on gender. And this, I think, all over the world is happening, but we identify this type of violence from political adversaries of women, but also gender violence from public in general, and more recently, in the very specific context in Mexico, we have identified criminal violence in electoral process. This is different type of violence are mixed during this process and are affecting women in different ways. So who we are is the reason or is the consequence of all of these causes. Aúna is a political platform of women promoting other women to enter and stay in politics. We don't want to run for office. We're professional mothers, caretakers, community leaders that want to support other women to start or continue in their political careers. And the selection criteria, or what we take into account to select these women to be accompanied by Aúna, are of course their past leadership, but the most important thing for us is that they have potential to represent a policy agenda that will transform women's lives. And also, because we are very interested in diversity in the decision-making positions, we support women from diverse identities like Indigenous women, Afro-descendants, sexual and gender diverse identities, and also young and disabled women. So we have a lot of strategies to accompany these women, but basically we want to bolster their technical expertise, enhance their social and political networks, and also cultivate their leadership and agency. And I think I'm running out of time, but what I really want to say is that I have like a couple of conclusions here to share with you. First, I think that, or in the case of Mexico, we have seen that quotas are affirmative actions that have helped achieve parity in Mexico. And it is important to recognize that despite the presence of women in decision-making roles, discrimination and systemic violence against them hinder their ability to autonomously exercise power. And we think that an advancement toward achieving substantive gender equality is this type of democratic innovations like Aúna or like She Should Run, that we are platforms that aim to address the systemic inequalities faced by women in politics through a lot of comprehensive support. And the last thing is that because Mexico, but I know that all over the world, we are in a context of social polarization, creating platforms that combine diversity and pluralism is very important, because we want to build dialogue and we want to build better futures for our societies. And we only can do that by convening different actors in society. And that would be all, Connie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next, we're going to hear from Alex.
Good evening from Kenya, Connie. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. And the question that I have for you, Alex, is I'm going to ask you to discuss what your organization is doing in promoting the quest for women to run for office. What concerns do women and girls have in becoming involved in politics, and how do you answer them? And what is the greatest threat to women pursuing leadership and democracy in Africa? And I know I gave you a big charge there. I'm saying in Africa, and your country is Kenya, so you can address that any way that's most meaningful to you.
All right, thank you so much, Connie, and good evening to all who are joining us on this particular platform. Allow me to start by saying I'm the most unlikely person to be on this webinar. One, because I'm the only man panelist, and that makes me a women champion. And secondly, again, because I'm keen in all the way from Nairobi. But this all just emphasizes on globalization and interconnectedness of humanity. To go straight to the question, allow me first to introduce myself. I know part of my introduction is actually on the fire that was going around. My name is Alex Matere, and I am the Executive Director of Youth Bridge Kenya. And my organization is inspired by a vision of pursuing an egalitarian and progressive society where the youth, both men and women, actually actualize social, political, and economic rights. To support this, we have a mission of providing a platform and avenues to nurture the youth through informed, innovative, and value-driven approaches for personal, community, national, and global development. Straight away to the question, what my organization is doing to support women who are running for office. My history is in student leadership, and I've actually also contested for public office previously in that senatorial. I had a very good senatorial bid, and towards the last elections that we had in Kenya, I was actually nominated by the then ruling party to represent young people in parliament. So I have had some quite good experience in as far as elective politics is concerned. And this informed the crafting of a leadership program that we call Ubuntu Leadership Program and Mentorship Program. This particular program, the way I have indicated, is actually inspired by the Ubuntu philosophy of I am because we are. This particular philosophy emphasizes on humanity towards others and caring and sharing that is backed by value systems. And through this particular program, we carefully select young women who have the potential or have previously contested for public office, and we take them through a leadership training course. This particular leadership training course equips them with knowledge, with skills, and also with expertise on how to manage a campaign, how to run for public office, and it has elements like communication, strategic leadership, lobbying. It has aspects of also fundraising that is also critical in terms of running a working campaign machine. Secondly, in as far as my organization is concerned, on the mentorship part, they normally say that experience is a good teacher, but here we believe that if you learn from someone who's experienced, then that is the best teacher you can ever have. So another thing that we have done in our leadership program is ensuring that women who already occupy positions of power have had a platform where they can be able to share the experiences and basically share comparative lessons of their various experiences when they were running for public office. For those ones who are freshly running for office, to be able to learn from them and also borrow best practices that can help them navigate the political environment for them to occupy positions of power. Lastly, in as far as that is concerned, another aspect is that we are seriously in the bid of pushing for advocacy. And this advocacy comes in two forms. One is that we push for mainstreaming of women inclusion and participation in political parties. This means strengthening of women links in political parties so that at least women who are even foolishly joining politics can actually find a platform when they have that interaction with women who are actually leading their political parties. Secondly, we're also pushing for the inclusion of women in the national executive councils of political parties. This ensures that whenever women run into office, at least they have a representation in the national executive committees or councils of political parties who are champions of women's representation, who are also champions of women inclusion in the political arena. And lastly, one of the most successful and transformative agenda that my organization has also been able to push is the adoption of two-thirds gender rule that ensures that no one or single gender can have more than two-thirds representation in any organ or in any body of government. This has also ensured that we are trying so much that also our parliament can have this particular gender representation rule being domesticated and implemented in parliament in as far as gender representation and mainstream is concerned, and also having women in all other public offices, starting with the county assemblies to parliament to senate and also to the cabinet. This gives them the platform to grow their skills. This gives them a platform actually to interact with other women and to interact with the citizenship for them to have a better bid whenever they run for office. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you for being a champion of women, because we can't make progress without men supporting us. And I think that's really something that we really need to remember. Women can't do it all by themselves. So my next question, I'm going to turn over to Erin. Erin, welcome. And can you discuss for us what She Should Run is doing to encourage and support women to run for office? What are the biggest challenges? And what actions have been most successful in getting women to political office? And can you give us an example of a story about, say, a star pupil who has run and been elected? And would these strategies work in situations described by Nuhad, Rebecca, and Alex? Okay, the space is yours.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be in this conversation. My name is Erin Loos Cutraro. I'm founder and CEO of She Should Run. We are a US-based, nonpartisan nonprofit that works to help women realize their potential in elected office. And Connie, I love the framing of your question because it captures so much. I think it is. I think it would be helpful for me to share a little bit about why I started She Should Run, because it's telling, I think, to a lot of the issues that have been addressed. So I didn't come from a political background, but I got into politics a little later in my professional career, and I had always worked in spaces where I was naturally drawn to figuring out what was the lever that we could pull that would affect the change for the most people. And so when I came into politics, it was really because I was introduced to this incredible woman who was running for Secretary of State in my home state. And I saw in her an ability and an interest. She was just such and is such an incredible human being who really cared. Her particular issue was about voter access and ensuring that as many people as possible had access and the ability to vote, participate in our democracy. And it wasn't until that moment for me that I realized just how essential it is to have, which I'm sure most everyone who is listening in knows, but how essential it was to have people who really care to make the world a better place and to make opportunities better for others in positions of power, because they can affect the lives of so many. I also experienced in that very first political engagement, I ended up working for her full time, just how difficult it was to be a woman in leadership, not only on the campaign trail, but also serving in office. From that experience, I went on to work as a political director of an organization that helped women when they were running already on the ballot and they were trying to get institutional support. So I was sort of helping them figure out how to get that institutional support, money being one of those big barriers to kind of that indication that you're a viable candidate. So we wanted to set as many women up to success as possible. And what I saw in that experience after working with hundreds of women all over the country is that there were so many incredible women with really unique perspectives and experiences who couldn't get a seat at the table with the institutional players. So they were, not able to show the viability because they couldn't raise the money at the level that their opponents were or others in the field were. And most often this affected women from marginalized communities. So, women who weren't coming from, already having the ability to bring dollars to their experience running for office or to bring that network. And what struck me in that is just frankly how wrong it was that the very people that we need in these rooms to bring the unique perspectives and experiences weren't able to get into the rooms because they didn't come with, with the built-in access to power and money that they needed in order to be successful. So for me, it became a little bit of a numbers game. And I want to be careful here because it's not just about the numbers. I want to be really clear that it's not just like, let's flood the system with as many women as possible, because there are real systems in place that keep women out, even when you have the best case scenario. So especially women from marginalized communities. So still, there was something that was really interesting to me in that, women who weren't already naturally in the room. So I think of them as sort of the really great echo chamber, right? The women who were either, raised to know they wanted to run for office, come from really political environments, come from, circles of power and influence that would naturally lend themselves to encouraging them to be in the space. How do we find the women who aren't there? And so that's where She Should Run came from. She Should Run came from the place of wanting to create a space that was actively trying to find the women who weren't looking for us. So how do we show up in the places where women from all sorts of backgrounds are leading? Maybe they're leading in their communities in volunteer efforts. Maybe they're leading in their businesses or workplaces in some way. But they're not thinking about what they can do in elected office. And so, since our founding in 2016, really got established before the major election, this big turning point in the United States in 2016 that we saw, where a lot of women stepped up. We had established programs that were at that point and have only gotten stronger since then, that starting place. So I often, if I were showing a slide right now, it would be the slide, I think it's the most powerful slide or visual, is like, people think about the making of a candidate as this like really linear straight line. Like you think about running for office and then you end up on the ballot and then you're either elected or you're not. And the reality is it's this giant squiggly all over the place line, and She Should Run provides a container for all of those fits and starts that happen, where women think about maybe they're inspired to see how they could lead in their community. They think about it, they step in, they see behind the curtain, they see it takes money, it takes thick skin, it takes connections, and they say, oh no, not for me. And then they say, but wait, I think I'm still interested, and they get a little bit more information, and then they realize, you know what, I don't have time for it right now. Life, whatever that may be, and they take a step back. And it's in those, it's okay. That's part of the process. That's part of the learning. That's part of where you're making your connections. So She Should Run is there providing, if it's toolkits or webinars or one-on-one connections to help women sort of navigate the reality of there not being one way to run for office. There isn't one campaign training that can do it. It's really a series of, for every woman, because women aren't monolithic, all of the different ways that women may move forward or not, how we can sort of embrace those individual experiences and provide the space and support and time that it truly takes for women to get all the way to the ballot, should she decide to do that. So that's the work of She Should Run, and I'm really glad to be in the conversation.
Thank you, Erin. You're making such good points. Everybody is providing such valuable information, and I'm so happy to hear the challenges, but also the seeking of solutions. And I think we want to present a lot of solutions to some of these problems to the best of our ability in the next phase of questions. So I'm now going to turn over to Ashley. Ashley, my question to you is if you could discuss your role in promoting CEDAW and what is the biggest challenge in getting CEDAW passed locally? And has the passage of CEDAW made any difference in legislation, or did you notice any changes in actions or even in attitudes from those in government? And then we were going to ask you also to speak to us about how CEDAW differs from ERA. And I know I'm using acronyms, CEDAW and ERA, so I'm going to leave it to you to explain what that is for our audience that may not be familiar.
Thank you, Connie, for hosting this webinar. I want, as a grassroots organizer and mobilizer, to just take this paused moment and recognize that I am joining you virtually from the unceded lands of the Lenape, federally recognized as the Delaware tribe, honoring the ancestral lands of the Lenape tribes of present-day New York City at CSW and their descendants. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of its ancestors, past, present, and emerging. So my name is Ashley Raveche. I am the director, or excuse me, I am a director of the League of Women Voters of California. And I also serve as the president of the United Nations Association of San Francisco. And beyond that, I am also the president of the Southern Marin Fire District, and I'm running a campaign for re-election to my special district. I've been a League member for a very long time, working to increase voter participation and civic engagement, encouraging a more diverse and representative government to help inform policy at the local level, serving on boards and commissions as a means of increasing my understanding of how government operates. But I never had the desire to be a politician. I prefer very much to be the villager and not the chief. I walk the line of an advocate, shaping policy from external support and sometimes the bully pit of the public meeting space, always in collaboration, always in a buddy system with others. I felt this was a safe space to serve from, and I liked flexing my policy making muscles from the sidelines. I've written local laws and policies, passed landmark state legislation, created agency strategic plans, developed best practices for state agencies and justice reform, but always quietly from the sidelines. In fact, I have found that I excel at building the plane as I fly it, or in other words, creating a framework that does not yet exist in order to address these complex issues that we all face today. So when I was asked to run for office, I laughed. Who, me? Why? Isn't there a better candidate out there? Couldn't you tap someone else? And then I listened to the required praises being bestowed upon me as a means of pumping up my ego so that possibly I would say yes. As a woman, though, it's not that easy. And I had to consider all the things that went unspoken in that moment. Who would watch my girls? Am I overcommitting? Am I qualified? What will they say about me? What will they say about how I look? Will they come after my family? Will I be safe and supported? Do I have the fortitude to survive campaigning? They say it takes a man an average of 3 minutes to decide to accept a bid to run for office, whereas it takes a woman 3 years to consider and be groomed and mentored and conditioned to accept the position. I knew this. I trained women on political engagement and empowerment as a League president. And I couldn't believe in that instance that all my mentoring and lessons learned were gone. as if I placed a mental block so large I could no longer relate to my lived experience. And as I sat in consideration of the offer to run, all those worst case scenarios flashed before my mind, and it felt like hours despite being seconds. But I boldly said yes. And I said yes, partially out of spite, but I said yes because I was afraid to say no and become only that what I have been conditioned to be, a stay-at-home mom, a wife, a volunteer. And I was worried in that moment that my decision, after I accepted, that it was too much, but I still said yes. I told my mentor, look, I'm going to put my name in here. And I want you to know that I'm not the perfect choice and I never will be. So if you're looking for a sit pretty and be quiet kind of candidate, I'm not your girl. But if you're comfortable with me thinking outside of the box and addressing uncomfortable issues and having those courageous conversations and breaking down the barriers in our community and allowing me to foster real change, then I can do this. My platform for the district was to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And in the 4 years that I have served our district, we've managed a program focusing on integrating equitable concepts into the fire and first responder culture. This includes hiring and recruitment initiatives in response to specific hardships, difficulties, and restraints that we've discovered through our research and our ongoing efforts and our learned experiences of our community, of what's preventing women, what's preventing people of color to join the fire service and become a first responder. So creating opportunities for young girls and femmes to join our hero camps or our her operations camp training on tactical and hands-on experience. And having a courageous conversation at every single board meeting on what equity means and try to work through quietly those held beliefs that they keep very close that are challenging our progress. In my remaining time, I would like to address your questions, Connie, and share how my leadership seat has encouraged me to engage in this national campaign for the ratification movement, which is seeking the US Senate's ratification of the Convention for the Elimination on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, as well as the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The goal of the ratified movement is to create a platform for partnerships under the umbrella of the women's movement. We aim to break down these silos and connect all sectors of our movement together. We seek to find the nexus where women's rights and the rights of the child intersect, such as our campaign to end child marriage, no exceptions, and ultimately to advocate for the United States to implement the CEDAW framework for gender analysis and data collection so that we can be making informed policy decisions. Once again, we are building this infrastructure for implementation in every county that adopts an effective CEDAW ordinance, including Los Angeles, San Diego, Santa Clara, Fairfax, Virginia, Washington, DC. What we know is that 80 million Americans are currently covered under the adoption of the CEDAW framework. However, over the lifespan of this treaty, it's been 40 plus years. We've seen a notable difference on when a municipality is successful in moving beyond a paper tiger and into effective management and implementation of CEDAW. And I think that has a lot to do with who is sitting in the leadership seat of truly understanding the issues. And CEDAW as a framework includes data collection, gender-based analysis of government policies, programs, procedures, and most importantly, budgets. So how does CEDAW relate to women in politics? Well, there is no political system in this world that has conferred on women both the right and the benefit of full and equal participation. While democratic systems have improved women's opportunities for involvement in political life, the many economic, social, and cultural beliefs that we are facing and challenging have seriously limited participation. In the last 50 years, women have not achieved equality in representation. And the numbers of women candidates, at least in California, in my area, in the northern part of California, are on the decline or they're aging out of office. And without a woman mentee in the lineup, the male candidates are outpacing women. The playing field for women candidates is already slanted. Women are at a greater risk to their safety and security, with more personal attacks on the rise. It has never been about whether she can do the job, but whether she can tolerate the backlash perfectly unruffled and polling higher in likability, not capability. The concerning trend that we are seeing in the United States policies are developing, and the decisions that we are creating are made by men alone. And that is only half of the experience being reflected, meaning only half the potential is being realized to solve the problems of today and the future problems of tomorrow. Can we really describe a system as democratic when only half the population is being seen and heard? So that's a challenge I want you to pause it on. Studies show that when there is full and equal participation in decision-making, compliance of equality improves. CEDAW is that equitable framework to help achieve these goals and many more. So as far as the UN lens, did you know that gender equality is mentioned more than 50 times in the UN agreements, but at no time is it mentioned how to achieve this? Again, CEDAW is the framework. It's the how-to roadmap, and it should be made central for answering how we will revitalize the United States and the global agenda of peace and security. And the remaining time I have, I would like to share a little bit more about an opportunity I had to join a US delegation for an intervention at the 87th session of the UN Commission on Human Rights with the CEDAW committee in Geneva. But I do know you wanted me to also describe briefly the difference between CEDAW and the ERA. So I'll present that first so that I can leave time for others. The ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, the 28th Amendment to the US Constitution, stating the very simple phrase that the women are equal. That is a sentence. However, CEDAW is the roadmap to achieve that equality. That is a process. And I think that the distinction between the two is that they're not in competition with each other. And that is a normal space that we feel as women, that when you choose to participate in one, you're already being pitted against the other. You're already being in competition with another. And I want to say that that is a false notion. That is what created these silos. And that is something that we need to check within ourselves and challenge every time it pops up. That is the system trying to break us down. So while in Geneva, we had an intervention, and it was wonderful because, as you may know, the US has not ratified CEDAW, which means we don't have a seat at the table. So this closed-door meeting with the CEDAW committee was a chance of a lifetime. And what we did was we reported on the US NGO and nonprofits implementation strategies of where CEDAW has been adopted, what gains we are seeing, and we focused really on the grassroots efforts of groups like Cities for CEDAW and the Ratify movement. We used our time there to seek out their information, their advice, their ideas. These are 23 global experts that are leading the women's movement. We requested an ongoing dialogue of how social norms are changed and how those norms impact personal choices of women and girls. So the question that the committee had for us was, what is the US doing to ratify CEDAW? And that is where I was able to share a little bit more. We shared more about our movement facing critical backlash, rollback of legal protections that are limiting equality in the United States. And I asked, those member states to question how US policies are impeding their country's ability to fully implement a CEDAW framework. In this meeting, I learned that 17 to 20% of the world's major cities are headed by women, which was both exciting and also not enough. So we have a long road before us, before equal representation. And this is my call to action. And forgive me for taking more time than I should have. But I encourage every single one of you to help close this parity gap. Look at the vacant seats that you have in your boards, your commissions, consider your special districts, your city councils, put your name in the hat, run for office. Your lived experience as a woman is the missing puzzle piece for us to solve the problems that are confounding us today. So thank you very much, Connie.
Oh, thank you. So now I would like to bring some questions in from the audience. One of the questions was addressed to Rebecca, asking, has Mexico's 50-50 quota resulted in any specific, actual, or impactful changes in Mexico? It's a big question.
Yes, thank you, Connie. I want to say patience because, first of all, it's very recently that we have parity. It's just from 2019. So this is the second election that we have 50-50 for office. So having said that, we are very aware, as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, that women are having trouble to exercise power. And this is why it's important, our work, but also to be patient, because I think we are working toward having substantive gender equality. Right now, we only have parity, and we already have 50-50. But there is a feminization of politics, and women are somehow being used by patriarchy that is very smart. So I would say we haven't seen like a real impact from the 50-50 party that we have, but we are in the process of preparing women to exercise power and push progressive agendas. And we really expect to have these changes in the future. And also, I will recall this concept that is recently promoted, which is the glass cliff. So right now, I feel that we want women to solve all our social problems, and it is impossible. That's why I said patience, because we have to be very empathic and exercise sorority with women that are in offices, because they are by herself confronting a lot of challenges to push the agendas. So it is important, because I read the second question that is related to feminicide, and I feel that is a whole other social problem that here in Mexico we're dealing with it, and it is related to social norms that somehow are related to women in public positions, but is not linear. So patience, sorority, and let's keep accompanying women, brave women that want to do this job, because not all of us want. So let's just keep accompanying them.
Thank you, Rebecca. I see that there's other questions there that are coming into the Q&A. And one question for all of you is what to do about obstacles that women face from political parties? And what are your party obstacles in the places where you live? So anyone on the panel can answer, or all of you can answer.
I can describe our situation, Connie, and my colleagues can build on that probably. So in my country, the obstacles are really many. The major one is that the traditional political parties who have been abusing the system for decades are still in power. And they designed an electoral law that fits their interests so that they can win all the time. But in 2022, it was the first time that we could make a little bit of a difference by having 13 members of the change movement who are independent, honest people who really used to be activists and strive for the support of people working for the people's welfare. So breaking that political system is very hard. In a country where there is no money, the infrastructure of every sector is falling down. And what is left is some people who are really, it's mainly the civic society, the people who are striving to make a change. But we have, I don't know if other countries experience that, we have a diaspora that is very supportive of change, that made the major contribution to the success of these 13 MPs into parliament in the 2022 elections. So in the absence of money, political support, etc., you look for resources within your communities, within your country. They could be outside, like our diaspora. But we have to be patient and understanding that breaking those cycles take time, and we need to be patient, take a deep breath, have perseverance so that we can make a difference. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nuhad. I have to say, we have great admiration for your efforts, despite the many challenges that you have presented. You are very resilient and you don't give up. And I think that persistence and resilience is really something that women need to rely on to be successful. You know, so much of it comes from the mind, you know, that you have the right attitude psychologically. Okay, you don't make it the first run, don't give up, run again, you know, and continue to fight the forces that are against you. So I think that it's, you're doing a great job in meeting some of the challenges. One of the questions, I guess, we spoke about financing and the lack of financing, and that being an impediment to women running for election. And you had identified resources within the country or outside the country to help support your financing campaign. I'm just wondering how campaigns are financed in other places, if anybody wants to speak to that.
Connie, can I say something about the parties, just very
Sure.
quick?
Oh, absolutely. Please. I would like anybody
Thank
to respond in any way you like. Please jump in. It's an open discussion between all of you who are experts on our panel, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Connie. It's just because in Mexico we have a lot of parties, and because the general public know that they don't have transparent rules on how to select a candidate. People are like, they don't want to get involved on these decisions. And we just wait that the party decide who is gonna run for office or not. And to the question on how to make parties to change, I think that we need to get involved and we need to ask for transparency and demand for information in order to have better candidates and have and make these doors to open to all the society and have a more or a stronger democratic systems. Because as I think that in the case of Mexico, they are the gatekeepers of democracy, of candidates, or of a lot of things, including financing campaigns. So my response to that would be, let's keep involving instead of just deciding to say, oh, I don't like politics. All of them are corrupt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Connie, if you allow me, probably just pick up from where my fellow panelists have left.
Yes, please, Alex.
Yes, and specifically on the issue of mainstreaming women participation and inclusion in political parties. In Kenya and generally in Africa, we have a cliche that if you're not on the table, then you're on the menu. And women in these sides of the globe have actually been on the menu for far too long. And it takes a well-designed intervention for them to find a seat at the table. It's either they find a seat or they actually bring their own seat. And in terms of political parties, one of the things that I have learned through the experience in Kenya, we passed a very progressive constitution in 2010. And this constitution, among other things, detailed on 2/3 gender representation. And therefore, it gave power to women to mobilize and lobby amongst themselves to be able to occupy positions of power, because no single gender would have more than 2/3 representation, even in political parties in the nation. And women took advantage of this, and therefore they consolidated themselves and came up with policy interventions to be able to address this gender gap that has been there in political parties. One of the ways that I still believe that all other women who are practicing elective politics should do in their various political parties is actually to support what the party policy say with a piece of legislation. For instance, now in Kenya, if a party does not have a women leader, if a party does not have 2/3 gender rule being observed at the National Executive Council and also in the membership, if a party does not have 2/3 of the candidates being more than 1/3 rather being from a different gender, then they do not qualify to actually field candidates. And because of this legislation in terms of the Political Parties Act that gives power now to women mainstreaming in politics, all other attempts could be futile. So I think going forward, it will also be prudent for all other players to support whatever party politics policies say with legislative pieces that ensure that political parties are being forced to actually adhere to the pieces of legislation that have been passed by Parliament or any other form of representation house. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to respond?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on some of what we see from She Should Run's vantage point on political parties in the US. So I do think we have a pretty unique perspective as an organization that is nonpartisan. And I think has because we've worked with hundreds of thousands of women and from a variety of political backgrounds, what is very clear is, of course, in the United States, there is a two-party dominant system, Republican Democrat system. There are third parties, though they struggle to have the same level of influence. We have an issue or a reality where younger generations are more likely, and we certainly see this at She Should Run, more likely to not want to identify with any political party. So sort of a rejection of the institutional side of politics. That said, because we have a dominant two-party system, there is some reality of women, especially at higher levels of office, needing to operate within the system. And the experience is very different for women who identify as Democrats and women who identify as Republicans. So the Democratic infrastructure, while not perfect, most certainly has more robust efforts to recruit and support women and sometimes gender diverse candidates. The Republican Party, less so. The infrastructure isn't there at the same level. There is a mixing here, though, that is hard to call out. It is both about the political parties and their constituencies and the sort of norms, cultural norms that they're representing that are at play. And so what is challenging for women in navigating these systems is that even within the party system that would most definitely be perceived to be more supportive of women, the Democratic sort of party infrastructure, it's still difficult for women, specifically women of color, to get the support that they need. And frankly, it is nearly impossible in the Republican Party. That doesn't mean that women can't find ways to work around it, but often that is the answer, is working around the infrastructure to find support outside of party infrastructure, to get the momentum that's needed, and the support that is needed. So it is a real challenge. And, you know, I've seen, I think in my years of working in this space, lots of efforts to try to reform the party structure so that, you know, so they can adopt more, you know, policies that would help women. And I think all of that is necessary. And at the same time, it feels like it's not happening fast enough. And so you see a lot of effort sort of popping up around the party system for women to navigate.
Connie, before we move on, I'd love to bring this back to kind of the local lens. So maybe away from the bigger elections of the part that are engaged with the parties, and the municipal elections that are often nonpartisan. And the question that you had asked was about the financing and how that's a barrier to participating. In San Francisco, and I know this is not true in every community, but San Francisco has a public financing program so that when you're seeking to put your name in for the mayor or the board of supervisors, that you can become eligible to public finance of upwards of $1 million if you're running for mayor. And the criteria is that you need to first be an eligible candidate. You need to show that you're serious and that you've committed to raising, I think it's like $10,000. So, you know, not insignificant, but compared to $1 million, that is a drop in the bucket. And that can be over 100 people. I think there is a target of you need to reach at least 100 constituents that will be supportive to raise that 10,000. And then the office has to be contested where the opposing candidate has already secured funds and or is, you know, coming financially secured with foundations and donors, possibly already the incumbent. And one of the reasons that they're doing this is to really remove money from the political system. Money in politics in San Francisco is very much rejected. They're trying to level the playing field. And I know that more communities would benefit if that was an option. But putting my own 2 cents, as I think that we would all benefit in the United States if our election cycles were shorter, so that it was not you know, years and years of a candidate running for office. Those years and years were the candidate doing their job in the office. And, you know, Europe doesn't have 3-year presidential candidate election cycles. They have 3 months. And so that's kind of the bigger challenge of, yes, it's always going to be an exorbitant amount of finance to run a 3-year campaign. But how much finance is really required to run a 3-month campaign? And how does that challenge candidates to be more successful in their approach, to utilize available tools, to pivot from those traditional norms and systems? It's a question that we should be asking ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. In other places, you raised a really good point. Does anybody want to speak to the terms of election cycles, like how far ahead of an election do people start campaigning?
I would like to say something, Connie, and especially about financing, because I feel it's very kind of different in the global south. For example, in Mexico, women don't receive money from parties for doing campaigns. And especially not underrepresented women, the ones that Aúna support. So what happens is that women have to quit their jobs and then raise money to do their campaign. And the little budget or support that they receive from their political parties are, you know, like merchandise, but with the face of the lead candidate, which mostly is men. So women are doing, you know, the campaign and walking their neighborhoods for voters with the face of a man most of the part in their merch, like trying to win votes, but with other one faced. So it's very difficult for them because there implies domestic negotiations, I mean, with their partners, raising money, quitting jobs. Some of them had told us that they are, by the end of the campaign, they have a lot of debts because they ask for money to run for office. So it's a really huge challenge for women, at least in Mexico, especially municipal level or local level, to have campaigns. And we only have 3 months of campaigns, but that is enough to broke like the finances of anyone that want to be in politics. Thank you.
I'd like to share our unique experience with how long do we start with the campaign. We start with the campaign the minute they decide that there will be elections. So it can be years. So suppose that we're due for elections in 2016. We may not do elections in 2016. We may do it in 2017 or 2018. So let's suppose we're gonna do it in 2016. We wouldn't know except like 3 months before. And then because of the electoral law, you have to be in a list. You cannot run alone. You have to be within a group. Then to find who do you want to run with, and it all depends on your sect. So I ran for a certain sect, in my case, the evangelical. So again, you want to see if these people really align with my thoughts and principles and ways of thinking and my political agenda and everything. So the preparation, I mean, our elections happened in May 2022. I only ran my campaign in April because it was the first week of May. I ran my campaign in April because in March, I was doing a national training for all nurses in cultural diversity. The whole month I was so focused on the nurses that I did not do the campaign. And because simply I don't have the money for that. So what happens is that while I'm doing that, the traditional political parties are buying votes, are bribing people, are buying the TV stations to take full airtime. So it's a different thing. Our experience is a different thing. This is why when women, in one of the questions addressed to me, who are required to have higher standards or have higher standards, and they are running or they made it to a certain position, whether municipality, parliament, ministry, they need all our support. They need to believe in themselves. It's not for their sake. Connie said, we want you to keep on. It's not about Nuhad reaching the parliament. It's about a woman who is like Nuhad reaching the parliament. We need to be represented irrespective of the name, whether it is Erin or Ashley or Rebecca or Connie or Chris or Jane. Women have to, and talking about diversity, we cannot have one brain running countries and municipalities, which is the man's brain. We have that diversity to complement each other. So we have to make them understand that. And coming from a nursing background, we always have struggles and challenges, and we always work hard to reach and achieve. Just think that to have an order of nurses in my country, which is the sole regulator of the nursing profession, it took us 40 years. We never stopped. 40 years and 40 years and 40 years. We'll keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've talked about this, but who are your strongest allies in your efforts? And who provided the most support in your effort to bring more women into government?
In our case, our only allies are those who engaged in the Lebanese revolution in 2019 through the change movement. and they are mainly young people. They are amazing. And one of the questions could be that would the boys accept to support the girls? Yes, with that young generation. I mean, look at Alex. He is a role model for youth and for men. Yes, if they are the right-minded people, they will support, definitely. And the person who really convinced me to run is my son. So yes, they would do that.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? And I have, we're closing in on our time, but anyone who wants to respond to that question is welcome to. And my final question to you would be, how will having more women in office strengthen institutions where you live?
Only allow me just to also say big up to the son who actually inspired the mother to run for office. And with this new generation that is coming up, I think one of the greatest achievements that we have, specifically speaking with African point of view, where almost 75% of the population is actually young, you'd find that the former stereotypes that used to be there was initially Africa was quite a patriarchal society. But I think with time, evolution has been there in terms of thought, in terms of perspectives. And the young generation that is coming up is devoid of the stereotypes of the slander. Therefore, they have the fire in the belly to push women candidates that contest for elections. In Kenya in 2013, actually, we started with 3 governors. In the last elections that we have currently, we have 7 governors across the country, which I think is a big success. We started with about 30 members of parliament elected from independent constituencies. Now we are talking about more than 70 members of parliament being women. And therefore, I think if the young population can actually be educated, be sensitized, then they are going to be the greatest champions of women getting into power. Just allow me to mention one thing in terms of the greatest risk that women face in terms of seeking public office through elections. In Africa, for the last about 3 years, we have had a phenomenon where we have had global of democracy. So the spat of peace has been there in the Sahel region, Niger, countries like Burkina Faso, countries like Mali, countries like Ghana. There's also been interregnum in our nearby country here in Sudan. And I think this somehow creates a barrier to women pursuing public office. For instance, I don't think in history there's any woman who has ever led a coup, who's actually just led by men, and therefore they use it to stifle the participation of women even in governance. And I think in such a conference, it will be important for us to come up with one united and very strong voice against the surge of coups in Africa and the global south, so that women can also have a conducive environment for them to pursue public office. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We've heard so many good ideas today. We've heard some of the challenges with financing, with quotas, protection and security, and even Ashley had mentioned childcare. Who's going to take care of my family when I run? And I think these are all very important challenges that apply globally. And also we've heard some solutions, right? We're looking at seeking solutions. So we heard some options for financing support, learning how to work around the party structure, demanding information and transparency, and shorter terms of election cycles. So I think that we've also looked at solutions to some of these issues, and I'm sure this is a conversation that could continue on and on and on. But I'd like to offer you the last minutes that we have on this webinar for each of you to either offer responses or closing remarks in a minute or so. And I'm so grateful for your participation today.
I want to thank each and every one of you. The lessons that I learned, as I see you on my screen, Rebecca, Erin, Ashley, and Alex, are so valuable. And I'm sure I want to promise myself and you that some of the lessons learned, I want to share with colleagues, the activists from the civic society or from the scholar activists, so that those lessons can be implemented. So we never give up. We believe in ourselves. We support women. Women should support women, but also men as well. And start with the youth, start with the adolescents. Teach them, train them, support them, nurture them, especially the females, to become the future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuhad.
Connie, I think for me, it's to thank for the audience, everyone who is tuning in from various parts of the world. And my message would be simple, that I think with the globalization and interconnectedness that we have across the globe, it would be important for us to share experiences, borrow best practices and localize them, tailor-made them to be able to fit our various setups, and just ensure that we have more than a third women participation and inclusion in politics. Lastly, allow me to leave you with a quote from Kofi Annan, who was a son of Africa and a former UN Secretary General, who said that gender equality is more than a goal in itself. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Alex.
I'm happy to jump in. I too just share a gratitude for what I've heard and what I've learned. I think there's so much value, and frankly that you can get so much in a short period of time, just sharing some of these best practices and some of these learnings. You know, for me, I would say it's really a call to for everyone to realize the role that everyone plays a role in this. You know, we hear, and I know everyone here agrees, it's, you know, this is about getting more women into the rooms where decisions are being made, and that is to the benefit of everyone. And that we each, every single one of us, whether we're leading that or supporting that, play a role in ensuring it's possible. If anyone's interested in learning more about She Should Run, you can find our website, sheshouldrun.org, or you can reach me. Please reach out personally. I'm Erin at sheshouldrun.org. You can email me, and I'd love to talk more.
No, thank you. I was going to ask our panelists if it's okay to share their emails or organizations so that people could continue the conversation with you personally.
Sure.
If they would like to. I know we're out of time, but if it's okay with all of you, we're recording this session. I have a list of all the people that registered, and I can send you the webinar recording when it's available. And I would also share in that email with you the contact information for our panelists, so that we can continue the conversation. But you've all been so generous with your time and your knowledge and your expertise, and I'm grateful from the bottom of my heart personally, and on behalf of League of Women Voters and the Global NGO Executive Committee. And I thank my support people, Jane and Chris, who work with me, and they've been sort of the tech support and monitoring the questions and other concerns that we might have. So thank you again. You all have a piece of my heart. So in closing,
Connie, may I say something? Sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely. Anybody who wants to continue speaking, please go ahead.
Just because I read a question in the chat that if there is some platforms like She Should Run in other countries, and Aúna is an example of this in Mexico. We were very inspired of the work of She Should Run, but we find a lot of other ones in Latin America, for example, in Brazil, in Colombia, in Europe, there is Run for Office. So I invite all the audience to look for the platform in your country, because I am very sure that we all have been being inspired by the work of She Should Run, and you must have one of your own in your country. So just go and look for it. Thank you, Connie.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
Connie, if I may, and then in the last closing 30 seconds here is that I have been mentored a long time by league members, and some of my leaders have always reminded me to bring my own chair to the table, because the seat that they're opening the door for me is I'm bringing someone to that seat, so that we're always amplifying how many are there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Anybody else like to speak, or if you see something in the Q&A that you would like to respond to, if people want to stay with us for a few more minutes?
Connie, 30 seconds, kindly. I continue insisting on globalization and interconnectedness of humanity, borrowing best practices and sharing them to be able to mainstream women participation in governance and also politics. And in this case, my organization will be organizing a Pan-African Youth Convention that has the theme of harnessing the demographic dividend of the African youth, the youth inclusion factor, and it has a sub-theme of women in leadership. So I thus take this opportunity to invite anyone who has never visited Kenya, who has never been to Africa, to actually come share experiences and also be able to empower the women, the young women from Africa to pursue public office. It will happen in Nairobi from 8 to 12 of July. Thank you, Connie, and God bless.
Oh, you're welcome. The United Nations Department of Global Communications is sponsoring a civil society conference in Nairobi on 9th and 10th of May of this year. So you'll be seeing some of us coming, and we'd be happy to meet you in person. I know I would. So we can continue with that. I have heard something in the past that I think might be valuable, and there's no I hear it's been researched, but I don't have a source to give you, but that women and men are very different in the way they consider solutions to problems. That men kind of look at the immediate answer to solve the problem, and they're not futuristic thinkers, whereas women spend more time looking for the answers that will serve us long term. And we think about how our decisions will affect our grandchildren, not just to solve the problem, for the immediate 2 weeks. And this is not in any way disrespectful to men, but I think that it's valid that men and women do think differently, about solutions. And this is maybe a reason why having more women in government and parliaments creates more peaceful, long-term peaceful societies. They say that the cycle of peace is about 15 years when there are more women in the parliaments. So it's just something to consider, another reason why women belong at the table and to be part of, peacekeeping solutions and decisions. Any last thoughts or anything else that you'd like to share? And I'm sorry to the audience that we couldn't answer all the questions, but we tried our best. And again, we'll supply information to you to continue the conversations with our excellent panel presenters. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of day, evening, go to sleep, wake up, wherever you are in the world. But we're so grateful that you joined us today.